Today's main event, how to save miles by flying more. Frequent Miler on the Air starts now. There are a number of creative ways you can use your airline miles to actually fly further than you would have otherwise and for fewer miles. We're going to get into a bunch of different options for doing that in today's main event.
And if that sounds a little bit like the spend more to save more, like no, that's not, believe it or not, this is spend less to pay more. I don't know, that's not it either. It sounds confusing, but you're going to save miles by flying more. Exactly. So we'll talk more about that today. Don't forget, though, that wherever you're watching or listening, you should give this a thumbs up, like it, leave us a review. Let us know what you thought. Let us know your ideas and opinions, too. We always love hearing from you. Sometimes we pull some content and show ideas out of that, too. So we appreciate all of that. And don't forget the timestamps are in the show notes. So if you're new to this, expand the show description so that you can find all the timestamps and jump ahead to a segment or come back to it later. Now, let's drag out this week's Giant Mailbag.
Today's Giant Mail comes from Eric. But first, a little bit of background. So Etihad, when they rolled out a new terrible cancellation policy for award tickets, buried in that news was a new terrible policy for the expiration of your miles. And what they posted was this. They wrote, the validity of Etihad Guest Miles will be extended by 18 months based on qualifying member flight activity. So what we interpreted that to mean, we meaning the Frequent Miler team, is that your miles would expire in 18 months unless you credit paid flights to Etihad so that you earn Etihad miles from actual flight activity. That's how we interpreted it. But maybe we were wrong. And this is where Eric's email comes in. Eric wrote, one data point, when I made an Etihad booking for American Airlines, so that means he booked an American Airlines flight using Etihad miles, it reset the 18-month.
Interesting that an award redemption is qualifying member flight activity, because I totally would have, even if you asked me if this would be qualifying flight activity, I would have doubted it. I would have said, oh no, what they mean is crediting a paid flight to Etihad. That's a pretty standard interpretation, I think, of that sentence. But there are programs where booking an award will extend the validity of your miles. So this is not unique. It's just the way they worded it. I wouldn't have expected this, but that's great news that redeeming will extend.
Yeah, it's really good news, and it makes Etihad's big devaluation last year, whenever it was that they had made these changes, hurt a little bit less. Knowing that it's at least possible to keep your miles alive without, doing too much is nice. So now if only there's Eric, right back with a loophole for how to get around their bad cancellation policy.
I was going to say, yeah. It's kind of like a Tylenol for a broken leg. It's, okay, it'll hurt a little bit less, but it's still going to hurt. Yeah. It is better than what we thought, but still not great, because all of that cancellation policy stuff is really what hurts. And then, of course, there's the fact that if you look up an award we've mentioned before, sometimes it'll actually cost more than it shows. So you may transfer miles and think, oh, I've got enough now. And then you get to the checkout screen and it's like, oh, actually, you need a few hundred more miles. So really annoying.
That's the other fun from Etihad. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say that if your heart's set on flying Etihad first class apartments, which is a spectacular way to fly, as both Nick and I know from experience, one of the best ways to find availability, unfortunately, is by using Etihad's own miles. Booking with other partners can be a lot cheaper, but finding availability through partners is really tough.
Yep. All right. Very good. So that brings us next then to card news.
More mail. Some more mail.
Okay. All right. I saw more mail. I wasn't sure. Okay. Yeah. So then, is there more mail this week, Greg?
Why, yes, there is. I'm glad you asked. Next piece of mail comes from John. And John wrote this in quite a while ago. I just hadn't had a chance to read it, but it's relevant to today's show. John writes, I love the FM team and have really enjoyed your blogs, videos, and social media posts. I've learned so much, but find that my largest out-of-pocket expense is domestic positioning flights. I know that sounds crazy, but flying around the world business class and staying at high-end hotels is cheap compared to the couple-hour flights to position from my small airport. Larger nearby airports are over 3 hours away, and the cost difference isn't enough to make it worthwhile. I use several search tools, but continue to struggle. I know you have discussed domestic positioning flights before, but I really need some help with this piece of the puzzle. And I'll just say that he says he knows that we've discussed it before, and in fact, episode 253 was called "Tips for Booking Positioning Flights." I don't think we talked as much about how to keep the positioning flights cheap as much as how to think about them, how to protect yourself, because there's hazards in booking positioning flights, and we go into all kinds of details about how to do it right there. But I wanted to read this today because some of the things we're going to talk about today about how to actually reduce the cost of flights may mean that adding positioning flights to some of your round the world business class flights might actually make those trips cheaper rather than more expensive. So I thought it was relevant to today's show.
That's a great point, and so going back to this a little bit here, because I think there's some interesting stuff in here. First of all, I love that he said, I know it sounds crazy, but flying around the world in business class and staying at high-end hotels is cheap compared to the couple-hour flights to position from my small airport. Yes, you're right. It sounds crazy, but not to us, right? I mean, like, I hear that and I'm like, well, no, I know what you mean there. My wife would love to do like a national park tour this August. And so we've been looking at stuff, and I keep telling her, I would love to do this, but it's not going to be cheap if we want to do that. It would be cheaper to go to Europe and stay somewhere, like a fancy place in Europe than it is to fly around the United States and book hotels at peak periods in popular places. So I totally get that. And to some extent here you have Greg and I are going to tell you some ways that may actually work out beneficial, as he said. On the flip side, there's some amount of this that's like I have a square peg. How do I fit it in a round hole? And there's not a magic solution. If you don't have the round peg, it's just going to cost you more. In other words, sometimes, I mean, there isn't always a solution to that. To me, that's part of the cost of doing business. And that flight is more expensive than the international awards, but it's way cheaper than it would be for me to book a cash ticket from my home airport to Europe. So you have to look at it as you're saving a ton, and that's part of what I call the middle of nowhere tax, because I live in the middle of nowhere, and one of the taxes of that, so to speak, I don't mean a literal tax, I mean one of the hidden costs is that it does cost more to travel to certain places. Of course, lots of other things about my daily cost of living are far lower than they would be in other places. So there's pluses and minuses.
When we flew around the world pretty much for the SAS challenge, one of my most expensive flights was the short Delta flight from Detroit to LaGuardia. And it's ridiculous. That's like a 1 hour flight, and that was one of the priciest on my whole itinerary. So that's unfortunate, but that's the way things are.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of demand. And domestic flights are expensive. I wrote recently about using companion tickets, and this is something that might help out that we're not going to talk about today. But I recently wrote about using the companion certificates that came with the Aviator Silver card after spending $20,000 in a calendar year, which I don't necessarily recommend spending towards those companion certificates. But you can read my post about using them. My experience, just Google frequent miler Aviator Silver companion certificates. I'm sure you'll find it because it saved us a ton of money on a domestic round trip where we were looking at having to spend between $600 and $700 a person for 6 people for like a 2.5 hour flight each way. And I was looking at that and saying, man, I could fly in business class to Europe for what it's going to cost me to fly round trip to Chicago. It's but that's unfortunately the way things are. So you got to look for some creative ways sometimes, and sometimes something like that can come in handy. Where we ended up paying $280 each instead of paying the 6 and change each or 7 and change each. I think it's actually the flights that we picked. So anyway, some help there, but not a ton necessarily. Hopefully, some of today's tricks are going to work for you, John.
I think so.
All right, let's move forward to card news. So what's new with cards this week?
So there's a couple things from American Express. One is new and one is probably not new, but sort of new to us, right? So Nick, can you tell us
First
about
up there,
these?
yeah, sure, sure. So the first one up is that there's a targeted referral promotion out for some Amex cardholders. It was reported on our Frequent Miler Insiders Facebook group by someone who found it on their Amex Gold card. Now, I don't know if it's targeted specifically to Gold card holders. It's certainly not something available to everyone. We didn't find it on any of the accounts, any of our accounts in my household, but the deal was to refer a new customer, and of course, you normally earn a points bonus. In this reader's case, I think they would earn 20,000 points when someone is approved using their link. But in addition to that, they would also, for the first referral, earn 5 additional points on travel and transit for 3 months on up to $25,000 in spend. So it's an extra 5 points per dollar on travel and transit, up to 25K spend over 3 months. And we've seen Amex run offers like that in the past. Usually, when they have, it's been available on all the various consumer cards. I think they've called it the Spring Forward promotion in past years. So I'm a little surprised that this seems to be targeted. But anyway, it's worth logging in and looking at your Amex account because, for instance, if I had a bunch of travel expenses coming up, I might consider referring my wife. Because remember, if I had this on my Amex Gold card and I referred my wife, she could open any card she wants. She could open a Blue Business Plus with no annual fee. And I would still get my +5 when she gets approved, as long as she uses my link to apply. We have a video on YouTube about how to take advantage of Amex multi-referrals. So you can look that up, Frequent Miler, Amex multi-referrals, in order to get some more information on how to do that. So that's a good promotion for those who are targeted.
Absolutely.
The other piece of Amex news this week, we learned from a reader that you don't need a credit card to transfer to some Amex membership rewards partners. And if you're like, what do you mean you don't need a credit card? Well, we were surprised too. So American Express has a couple of rewards checking accounts. They have a consumer one and a business one. And we heard from a reader who has a consumer Amex membership rewards or an Amex rewards checking account. And so they canceled their last Amex credit card. And so all they had was the checking account still, and they were still able to transfer points to a select number of membership rewards transfer partners. Now, they couldn't transfer to all membership rewards transfer partners, but it was a pretty impressive list nonetheless. I mean, it covered a bunch of the most popular airline programs in there. There were a few that were left out that I would like to have access to, but it was interesting to know anyway that that's another way to keep your Amex points alive, because right now the Amex Everyday card is no longer available for new applicants. So the only way to keep your Amex points alive right now, I would have thought, until this news anyway, I would have thought would have been to get a Blue Business Plus card.
The only way with no annual fee.
With no annual fee. That's what I meant. Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
with no annual fee would be a Blue Business Plus card, which is something I recommend to most people, but some people don't want to apply for business credit cards. And so then there hadn't been a way to keep your Amex points alive without an annual fee until we learned this. So you could open an Amex rewards checking account. Now, I don't know for sure that this also applies on the business rewards checking side, but I think it probably does, because after we received this email, I noticed during the Amex Member Week promotion, they had a transfer bonus to Marriott. And in the terms, it specifically called out saying that the transfer bonus was not available if your only membership rewards product was an Amex rewards checking or business rewards checking. So I assume that both still have the ability to transfer to probably the same set of partners, but you can read our post for more on that.
And the other thing I'm going to point out is like, so let's say, you're ready to cancel your Amex Platinum card. You don't want to pay that annual fee anymore, but you have a bunch of membership rewards. You don't have immediate plans for them. Having this checking account keeps them alive, and then later, maybe you want to sign up for a green or a gold or another platinum card, whatever it is. Then those points should get the full capability, not just the few partners, but the full capability back. And so it is a good way to just kind of keep them alive. And even if you can qualify for business credit cards, maybe you're pushing up against the limit of about 5 credit cards that Amex allows you to have. And so you don't want to use up one of those slots because you'd rather have your 5 different Hilton cards or whatever it is, then that's another reason that this might be a good idea.
And then here's a thought I'm going to plant that I don't know about this at all, but this is for the other end of the spectrum. So we're talking from one end of the spectrum so far with our advice for that. From the other end of the spectrum, if you have reason to worry that your Amex cards could get shut down, maybe it makes sense to have the checking account because I don't know if your credit cards get shut down. Does your checking account get shut down too?
No
Maybe you'd
idea.
still retain the ability to transfer. So might be a good backstop to have a rewards
Potentially.
checking account.
Sure. Don't go scaring people though.
No, no, no,
Most
no.
people don't have their credit cards shut down,
It's
so
shut
it's
down.
not
No,
something I would worry about.
it's rare. That's why I
And
said at the very opposite end of the spectrum.
if you're doing things that would likely get your card shut down, you know it already. So
Right. Correct. Correct. Okay. All right. That's card news. Next up, mattress running the numbers. This week's mattress running the numbers, we've got a transfer bonus out from Chase Ultimate Rewards points to IHG One Rewards, an 80% transfer bonus running through April 30th. 80%. That sounds huge. That's way bigger than most transfer bonuses we see to most programs. So what do you think, Greg? Is this worth transferring your Chase points to IHG?
definitely not. So I know it sounds huge, but I'm gonna walk you through a couple scenarios here of why I think it's not a good deal. So first of all, our reasonable redemption value for IHG points is about zero point 0.6 cents per point. That means on average they're worth about 0.6 of a point each. Now they can be worth more, but and often are, but that's the average that we've seen. And so if you transfer your Chase points to IHG and then redeem those points for that zero point 0.6 average, you're only getting barely over 1 cent. You're getting 1.08 cents per point value from your Chase points. And you can do so much better than that. I mean, transfer to Hyatt and get, close to 2 cents or more. Transfer to airline programs, or just if you have the Sapphire Reserve, book travel, get 1.5 cents per point value, things like that.
Sapphire Preferred, get 1.25.
Yeah. It's so easy to get more than 1.08. Now things look worse if you compare to when IHG has sales where they offer the points for sale for half a cent each. I don't think that's as common as Hilton, which does that all the time, but still we do see that regularly with IHG, and so at half a cent each, your points, your Chase points become worth zero point 0.9, like so not even 1 penny. Or another way to think about it, a third way is like when a sale like that is going on, you could just straight out cash out your Chase points for a penny each and buy 2 IHG points for every 1 Chase point. So every time IHG has a sale where their points are cost half a cent each, that's like 100% transfer bonus from Chase Ultimate Rewards or any other points that can be cashed out for 1 cent each. So anyway, I don't recommend doing that because again, that limits your Chase points value to 1 cent each. But for all those reasons, no, we don't like that. But I do need to back up and say that doesn't mean IHG points are bad. It just means that the sort of starting value of them is very low. It's kind of like when you transfer Chase points to Hyatt, it's like getting dollars, whereas when you transfer to IHG, you're getting quarters. And so
quarters aren't bad. That's just a bad trade.
Exactly. It's just a bad trade. That's exactly it.
You got enough quarters, and you got something that's worthwhile.
It's still really valuable and can be worth, and they can be worth a lot more than a quarter each. But it just depends on the circumstance.
Correct. Very good. That was a great way to explain it. Excellent. All right. Awards, points, and more. Speaking of transfer bonuses, we've got other transfer bonuses to discuss as well on top of the Chase One to IHG. Amex has a 20% transfer bonus from membership rewards to Aeromexico Club Premier. So if you're looking to use your Aeromexico points, you get 20% more. Now, that's one of those ones that's not a one-to-one to begin with because I think they've traditionally used kilometers or something. So it's like a 1 to 1.6. So 20%. I don't know. You do the math.
Whatever that is. Yeah.
Whatever that is. It's more. But are you excited about that?
I'm not. I mean, there are weird situations where Aeromexico points can be valuable, but it seems so infrequent that I wouldn't bother looking into that unless you already know of something that you're after.
Right. That's totally it. Yep. There's also a 20% transfer bonus from Amex membership rewards to Etihad Guest. Do you feel better about that one? You just said that it could be a great way to fly the apartments.
Yeah. Not really, because we've seen, if I recall, I think we've seen bigger transfer bonuses to Etihad. So even if you are kind of if you're holding out like hope to someday fly Etihad apartments and you're thinking of transferring to Etihad from these transferable points, I don't know. I'd wait and look for a bigger transfer bonus than 20%.
You're a hard man to impress, Greg. I'm going to take a third shot here. How about if I told you that there is still a 25% transfer bonus from Citi Thank You Rewards to Avianca Life Miles that's valid through April 12th. So the other ones I just talked about were all through April 30th, but
Yeah.
the transfer bonus from Citi Thank You Rewards to Avianca Life Miles, again, 25%, only alive through April 12th. Are you more impressed by that?
I mean, this is one of those where if you have plans where Life Miles is the right miles to use for it, then great, you'd get more. So it would cost you fewer city points, but I would not do this speculatively. No.
Yeah, there you go. I was actually really surprised just last night. I was looking at some award tickets, and I was surprised to see that U.S. to the Middle East was cheaper with Avianca Life Miles than I expected, especially after they devalued awards to Europe. I was
Oh,
actually
interesting.
surprised at the prices I saw. So I was looking at business class. Now, I think this is with the 10% discount because I have Life Miles Plus, but 70,000 points one way in business class from the U.S. to the Middle East, which is not amazing, but it's pretty good. It's competitive. And when you consider the fact that awards to Europe are like 70,000 also, I was surprised. I expected the Middle East to have been a little bit higher. I hadn't paid attention after they devalued as to what the price was to the Middle East. So maybe that's one that's worth looking at with a 25% transfer bonus. That'd be 50 something thousand
Yeah.
to fly in business class. So there you have it. All right. That's not it, though, for awards points and more. Next up, we have some updates to popular tools, and you know more about these updates than I do. So why don't you
Yep.
tell
Yep.
us what has updated?
A couple of award tools that are popular. Seats.aero. That's probably my favorite award search tool for myself. It's nerdy, so it's not as much like one for like beginners, but it's just so powerful and fast and everything. I love it. They added support for Qatar Avios, and the main reason that's exciting is that Qatar reserves a lot more award space for their own members than for partners. So you could already like look for Qatar awards, like flying Qatar, by looking at Virgin, no, at Virgin Australia? No, Qantas. I can't remember. Qantas. It must be Qantas. Using Seaside Air to look at Qantas awards.
Yes.
And or even JetBlue using because JetBlue can be used to, so you could find awards in those ways, but it's not going to find those awards that Qatar's keeping for their own members, and so now there's a way to do that. So I find that pretty darn exciting. Another exciting development is Rome.travel has added support for Cathay Pacific Asia miles. Now, the only tool that I'm aware of that has supported Asia miles up until now has been Point.me. And the problem with Point.me is that searches are slow. There's no way to set a range of dates, and it doesn't do alerts. So Rome does those things, and so it's finally possible to search Cathay's own program for their own flights. It doesn't search many partner flights. That is, like if you want to use Cathay to book American Airlines, you're not going to find that. But if you want to use Cathay to fly Cathay, then this tool now is a great way to find those awards. I've been told, I haven't looked into this yet, that it also will find Japan Airlines flights bookable with Cathay Pacific.
Interesting. Very good. All right. Well, those are good updates then. Love the award search tools. They've been saving me lots of time, and award alerts have been working out really well for me also. So that's all exciting to hear that there's good developments there. Another exciting development that I was sort of happy to see come back is National Rental Car has brought back their 1-2 free promo. It's a little different this time than it used to be, but it's back again. So registration, of course, you have to register for this, and you have to rent between April 1st and June 22nd of 2025. This time around, I think this might have been the case the last time they ran this too. You have a minimum of two-day rentals. So your rentals have to be 2 days long. But if you have two rentals of at least 2 days, then you'll earn a free day with national rental cars. So that could be pretty good. What do you think about this?
It's a great promo. National. I'm a fan of National's award program as it is. I like the fact that with certain credit cards you get executive status with National, and that lets you pick not just from the Emerald aisle, but from the executive aisle. So you can pick nicer cars for the same price. You just book the standard car and drive off with a nicer car. Um, and normally, I think with executive status, you have to have 6 rentals in order to get a free day. And this lets you do it with just 2 rentals, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. And the free rental days with National, I love those because they work on one-way rentals. And National, unlike some companies, some rental car companies bake, or rather, some rental car companies charge an additional separate fee for a one-way rental that is going to be there no matter what, even if you used your points to cover the rental. Whereas National bakes that cost into the daily rental rate. So when you use a National free day, you could use it on a one-way rental and get a free rental. Sometimes you have to pay a couple of dollars in airport taxes or something, but just a little tiny bit, and that can be really valuable. I have in the past often used National free days for one-way car rentals that would have cost $150, $200, sometimes even more, depending on the situation. So I love the National free days for that, and I would be pretty tempted by this. But man, all of the situations where I've had to rent a car recently, National has just been so much more expensive than everybody else. So that's been the bummer. And when rental cars were relatively cheap, even if they were 20% more, it was a small enough difference that I was still willing to pay 20% more. But man, as they've gotten more and more expensive here, it's been more than 20% and much more significant costs as rental cars have gotten more expensive. So I have not been, I don't even remember the last time I rented from National now. It used to be my go-to every single time, but unfortunately, I haven't rented from them as much. I'll hope
Yeah.
that maybe it'll work out
Yeah,
at some point.
check your if you work for a large company organization of some sort, check to see if they have national car rental special rates because some do, and that can make it much more desirable. But you're right, I've noticed the same thing lately. If you're not booking one of those special rates, National's prices have been insane lately.
Yeah, yeah. I'll have to follow up with the frequent miler HR department later on today and see see what code we have.
So,
Because
so
I
for
missed
those
that
for
in my
those
welcome
listening,
packet.
not everyone knows this, but Carrie's dog Max is our HR department, and it'll be interesting. I hope we get a video of Nick going to HR to ask about the national discount because that should be a fun a fun video to watch.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what I can work out there. You missed that in my welcome packet, Craig. I never got the national rental code, so I'll have to follow up with Max.
Blame HR. They're responsible for
True,
the welcome
true.
packet. Yeah.
All Max's fault. Okay. So finally, in award news, awards points, and more this week, Virgin Atlantic has, so nice of them, they've jacked up the Delta One surcharges departing Europe. So now if you book a Delta One award through Virgin Atlantic, let me back up. Sometime last year, they increased surcharges on flights departing the United States. So whereas it used to be you would pay $5.60 to fly Delta One using your Virgin points departing the United States. Now you'll pay like $1,000 in surcharges on one of those awards departing the United States, and they were nice enough to do that now on the awards departing Europe as well. At least as recently as like a week ago or so,
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, maybe by the time this publishes, it was only a few $100s. It was still more than it should have been, but a few $100s departing Europe. And now like you're looking at $1,100, $1,200 in taxes and fees departing Europe.
Yeah, it's insane. And let me be very clear. I know Nick said this, but that we're talking about when using Virgin points to fly Delta specifically. They didn't do this to like if you're using Virgin points to book Virgin itself or to book Air France or KLM. They didn't do it to those flights, but they did it to Delta for some reason. And so I did do some research and published some ways you can get around these new surcharges. One is if you're coming from Europe, you could book Delta One round trip. and it seems to go back to those lower around $400 in surcharges by booking round trip, which is kind of wild. So the same flight like Amsterdam to Detroit might have like $1,200 in fees if you book it one way, but book round trip, and then it drops to about $400. Yeah. The other way is kind of bizarre. Let's say you want to fly to Europe. If you have the opportunity to book a flight within Europe first, like it could be months ahead of time. So an example in my post was fly from Luxembourg to Amsterdam for it's very cheap in miles and points. And then later you're going to fly Delta from Detroit to Amsterdam. By booking that whole thing as one multi-city award in Virgin Atlantic system, it eliminates the surcharges on that award. But obviously, that requires a lot of planning. I mean, you have because you actually have to fly that first flight. You can't just put it on there and hope for the best. The whole thing will get canceled if you don't fly it.
Yep. So you got to fly that first leg and find availability for the future leg. So and you have to plan
Right.
both those things at once. There's a couple pieces to that puzzle, but if you can put
Right.
it together.
Yeah, yeah. Finally, the other way is forget using Virgin Atlantic points. Use Air France, KLM, Flying Blue points. They don't put those ridiculous surcharges on. They charge a little bit more in miles for the Delta flights, but it not so much more that you'd prefer to spend $1,200. So that's the other way to get around it.
Very good. Excellent. All right, that brings us to the next section up, which is let's see,
And
roll our
time.
way. Oh, it's time for the main event already. My goodness, we moved right into it. All right, it's time for this week's main event.
Today's main event: how to save miles by flying more. So, if you actually want to fly further, then all the techniques we're going to talk about are going to be great for you because you're going to get to go actually further than you had intended and enjoy that extra flying. But you might also realize as you're listening to all this that there are opportunities to save miles by booking a longer journey, but not taking the longer journey. That is like, maybe you want to fly to Hong Kong, but you book a flight that stops in Hong Kong but goes on to somewhere else. And that has different names when you don't actually fly that last leg. Some people call it skiplagging, some people call it hidden city ticketing. Regardless, I wanted to put some warnings and caveats up front here before we get into the details, because all of the options we're going to talk about you could potentially do that. You could potentially lower your costs by adding a leg at the end that you're not actually going to fly, but there are some dangers in that. Do you want to go through those, Nick? Or
Sure. So first of all, you can't skip a segment at the beginning or in the middle of your itinerary. It can only be the last segment because if you skip anything at the beginning or in the middle, then it will cancel the rest of the itinerary beyond that. So the only leg you can book and consider skipping is the last segment of the itinerary. So keep that in mind. Now I say that, and there's going to be somebody out there who's like, but wait, Italian law says you can skip the first segment of an award that starts. Yes, there are a couple of countries with strange legal exceptions, and good luck. Maybe you'll be able to explain that at the check-in counter why you skipped that segment. If you're confident in that, great. But for anybody else out there, only the last segment.
I love how you put that. Good luck.
I mean, you have to convince the check-in agent, not me. So
yeah. If you want a very unhappy marriage, do that with your spouse and children in tow, and see what happens.
Right. Next tip up, avoid checking bags, because if you are going to try and skip something, you don't want to have checked bags because your bags may go where you don't intend to go. So you want to do this as team carry-on only for the most part, with maybe some rare exceptions. But
yeah. So this one, again, like there's exceptions which are a little easier to anticipate than the segment one that we talked about. So for example, if you're flying into the United States and have another segment after that, you can expect that you're going to have to collect your bags at the entry point in the United States anyway. So if you check bags, you can still get them when you enter the US.
But if they lose your bags and then they
If
have
they
to
lose
send
your
them
bags,
later
then you're
on,
toast. Yeah.
then yeah, then you're making a flight somewhere to go pick up your stuff probably. So, or have a problem. Anyway, so avoid checking bags, avoid gate checking bags. Same piece of advice there. You want to not be gate checking a bag because again, it might end up in the place you don't intend to go to. So careful there. Consider leaving your frequent flyer number off the ticket. Why? Why this?
So airlines don't like this, and if you do it a lot, they may take action against you. They may cancel your frequent flyer account, including all the miles you have. They might actually sue you. They've been known to do sometimes. That's very unlikely. You'd have to do that a lot for that to happen. But when you're booking an award ticket, even if you're booking it for yourself from your own account, you don't have to put your frequent flyer number on the ticket. You could say to the system, "I'm not flying," but then put in your own name as the passenger on the award ticket, and that might help. It might not because it wouldn't take that much for the airline to figure out that it was
That
you.
it's
But
you.
but anyway, it might
Yeah.
help a little bit.
Yep. And always have a story ready. So, if you are looking to, well, all right, so let's back up. In a case of irregular operations, the airline might reroute you to get you to the destination on your ticket. So let's just give it an example. Let's say you had a New York to Chicago to Los Angeles, to keep this very simple. You had that booked, and really you just want to go New York to Chicago. And this is not a realistic example, but let's say that that's the case for you, okay? So you really just want to go to Chicago, but that New York to Chicago flight gets canceled and they say, oh, you know what? That's okay. We can reroute you from New York to, I don't know, Dallas to Los Angeles. You need a story ready as to why you need to connect in Chicago. If you
Right.
ultimately need to get to Chicago, you need to be able to explain why that's not going to work routing through Dallas. You have to fly through Chicago for one reason or another. Someone's meeting you at the airport with medicine you need for your trip to Los Angeles, or like you got a meeting or something. You got to have a reason why you need that connecting itinerary.
Yeah. Or if you don't want to lie about it, just be ready to say, you caught me or whatever. I'll pay for a different way to get to Chicago at that point.
Right, right. Yep. Yeah, and I mean that's a good point. Yeah. And all of these caveats and things are things that we tell you because there is some risk in booking these. If you do this once a year, I think it's unlikely that you're going to run into an issue. Although we
Yeah.
have heard some reports of specific agents being a little bit more or looking for this a little bit more, airlines that are using AI to look for this a little more and see, oh, your home address is in Chicago. Are you really trying to do a hidden city ticket sort of here? So there are a couple of reports of that, but for the most part, if you're not abusing this repeatedly, I think that those risks are relatively low. But it's still, I wouldn't try to skip any. Obviously, you can't skip a first leg. I would avoid checking the bags and taking off the frequent flyer number if you can, out of caution.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All that said, how can we save miles by flying more?
Yeah. Now that we have all that Debbie Downer stuff behind us, no offense to Debbie, um, we have the different techniques categorized, and the first and probably most common thing that you might stumble across just by chance is married. It's called married segment logic, and it's where airlines provide pricing or award availability not based on the individual segments, but the entire route. So, for example, maybe you're flying. Actually, I'll give a real example that I've seen. Maybe you're flying Detroit to Lisbon, and the best route for you might be Detroit to Paris to Lisbon, and that award, if Air France is trying to compete on that route, that award might be a lot cheaper than the Detroit to Paris. And so if your real goal was Paris, well, maybe flying further to Lisbon wasn't actually a good example, but to somewhere else in Europe, you might find much cheaper prices. And some airlines airline programs are, we see this very common with some of them and less with others. So I've seen it a lot with American Airlines. Like if you're flying to an American Airlines hub, good luck getting a good award price, but fly past that hub to some, to Topeka or something, then you can find a really good award price. Often, Air France Flying Blue has this all the time. Japan Airlines, we've seen it. So those are just a few that come to mind for me.
Yeah, and I think this is where award search tools, this is like a hidden value found in award search tools or a hidden benefit in learning how to use them because, excuse me, there are times when I find this in airport combinations that I wouldn't expect and or I wouldn't have thought to look up a flight to airport X, Y, or Z, but if I'm able to look more broadly at Europe, for instance, like with a tool like Seats.aero, you can look at flights to Europe in general and or I think award tools Mega Explorer or something you got that option. So I find those tools useful because sometimes they will find those married segment awards that wouldn't have even come to my mind to have searched for. I often start by looking, and we've often said before, you want to start by looking at the long haul flights and look for the nonstop long haul flights first and then try and piece together the rest of the stuff. And that's a good general piece of advice, but it goes counter to this, which is finding some of those married segment logic type situations. And again, those exist in the United States, they exist internationally. So, it creates somewhat of a game in finding that stuff. But don't be surprised. Sometimes that married segment logic can decrease the price significantly.
Yeah, totally. And my favorite tool for doing what Nick just described is Pointier's flight deals. A lot of tools have this capability where you could say, I want to fly from the United States to Europe or to anywhere or to Asia, and or you could put your home airport to anywhere or to Europe and things like that. A lot of them have that capability, but Pointier seems to have the most complete data set for it somehow because I often find good results with that versus other tools when I've done head-to-head comparisons. And yeah, so you're going to find things like, oh my gosh, I can book Air France from Detroit to Paris to Lyon for 60,000 miles in business class versus if I just want to go to Paris, oh, they're going to charge me 140,000 points.
Yeah, and one final point I want to make on this is know that this sometimes applies on mixed partner type stuff. Last year, when I was flying home from Japan, and at the end, I think of our flying by the seat of our points competition there, Tokyo to Chicago was not available. But if I flew Tokyo to New York, then suddenly Japan Airlines first class was available from Chicago, or rather from Tokyo to Chicago, combined with an American Airlines leg from Chicago to New York. Again, that Japan Airlines flight didn't show up as available as an award for the nonstop, but it did when I was combining it with another American Airlines flight. So sometimes you'll see that across partners even, which you might not expect if you've never run into that before.
Right. Absolutely. And that's more rare, I think.
Yes, I think so.
But it does happen, and I'm not really
Yeah.
sure why. Okay, that was married segment logic. Next one is start to end distance based award pricing. Okay, so let me explain. A lot of airline loyalty programs, they have zone based pricing where they have a single price for Saver Awards from like North America to Asia, for example. But a lot more of them have distance-based pricing where the price goes up the further you're going to fly. And sometimes it's a sort of a combination, like exactly what the price is a combination of what zone you're coming from and to and how far you're going. Of those that price based on distance, what's rare, but not, not what's rare, but there are some that do this is where they measure the distance not based on all the segments added up, but where you started and where you ended, the point-to-point distance between those. So start to end distance. One example, if you are using Virgin Atlantic to book awards on Air France or KLM, short distance awards. This doesn't work for their long distance, like flying international, flying across the sea type of thing. But for shorter distance ones, Virgin has a distance-based award chart that is very, very cheap, and it measures start to end. So you could fly from you could fly from one city in Italy to another city in Italy through Paris or through Amsterdam. And the price will be at the rock bottom of their award chart. I think it starts at, if I remember right, like 4,000 points
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
economy, and I don't know,
8,000 in
8,000
business.
in
Hmm.
business class for because you're flying longer. You're flying, all the way to another country and back to Italy to go to a close by city.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a really cool one that I've enjoyed a couple of times now using Virgin Points specifically. So that's start to end distance-based pricing. And I think there are a couple others that do that. A similar idea, maybe slightly different, is start to end zone-based pricing. And so let me give you an example of what I mean. Actually, I'm gonna switch these around from the way I originally wrote them. Turkish changed their award chart, and I don't know the current price on this, but before they recently changed it, so I know that this idea works. The pricing is going to be a little bit different than what I'm going to say now because I don't know what the price is today. But before they made that change, it was 30,000 miles in business class between points in Asia. So if you were going to go from one point in Asia to another point in Asia, it was 30,000 miles one way in business class. And of course, for the most part, you would be flying Star Alliance partners within Asia, but they still price that way even when you connected in Istanbul. So during one of our competitions, actually, I really wanted to try to get to Mongolia, and I didn't end up making it work because the taxes and fees were just going to get too expensive on getting there and making it work for the specific trip. But a specific award that I looked at booking was from Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia to Taipei via Istanbul. So that would cost 30,000 miles in business class, even though both of those flights are like 10 or 12 hours a piece, or maybe even a little bit longer, because it was Asia to Asia.
Hmm.
So it let you transit through another region without an issue there. And then that's not the only situation, I think, where that has worked with them. Another one that I'm more familiar with because it's top of mind now with the current pricing is SAS. SAS Eurobonus. Some people out there did the SAS Eurobonus Millionaire Challenge. Greg and I and Steven did. So I've got a bunch of SAS miles now. And SAS has region-based pricing. And so, for example, if you wanted to fly from Bangkok, which is in Southeast Asia, to the Middle East, it would cost 78,000 miles one way in business class. So, for instance, Bangkok to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, would cost 78,000 miles on Saudia. However, if you want to fly from Southeast Asia to Central Asia, so you wanted to go from Bangkok to Delhi, India, it's only 54,000 miles in business, even if you connect in Jeddah. So you can fly Bangkok to Jeddah to Delhi and pay 54,000 miles in business class. So you're going to get that long haul flight that would have cost 78K plus an additional flight, and you're only going to pay 54. Now, in that case, I wouldn't recommend trying a hidden city ticket if your goal was really to visit Saudi Arabia, since you need a visa, and I wouldn't want to be explaining to an immigration officer a hidden city ticket if they weren't expecting me to come into the country. So I don't recommend it in that specific instance. But I wrote a post about my first look at SAS Eurobonus searching for sweetness. You can look that up and apply that concept to other parts of their award chart.
Yep. Yep. All right. Those are great tricks. The next example or next category of ways of flying more for less is where you use mixed cabin award pricing to your advantage. A lot of airline programs, if you have one segment in business class and another segment in economy, that's called mixed cabin awards. Most programs will just price it at that higher cabin level for the whole thing. And so it doesn't help you. In fact, it just hurts, so that you're flying in a less comfortable cabin and paying the price as if it was all the higher level cabin. But there's some that do it differently. And so one of them is Avianca Life Miles. And what they do is they average the price based on the distance flown. So, if you fly from North America to Europe in business class, I can't remember what the current award pricing is for Avianca, but
70,000, I think 70 something.
I'm gonna make up numbers to make the math
Yes.
easy. All right.
Good.
Let's say it costs 80,000 miles one way, and let's say that economy costs 40,000 miles one way. Now let's say that you book a award that is exactly half the distance is flown in economy and half of it's in business class, then they're going to average those two costs to 60,000. That's what it would cost you for that combination. So now let's take it, differently. Let's say you're flying. I'll give an example going the other way. You're flying from Europe to the United States, and you want to fly. Let's say you want to fly from Paris to New York, and let's say Zurich to New York for one that actually has a good Star Alliance availability. And let's just imagine that Life Miles would charge 80,000 for that business class flight. You tack on New York to San Francisco, and in economy, that extra leg is going to bring down the award price a lot. The further it is. So if you flew to Alaska, all the better. That's an example of how you could use mixed cabin award pricing to bring down the cost.
But you do need to be able to find award availability, and Avianca
Yeah.
Life Miles is kind of difficult in that regard.
That's the hard thing.
That's both. So let me back up. United is difficult in that regard because they don't offer a ton of award space to partners to begin with, and then Avianca makes it even more difficult because they don't necessarily display all of the space that should be available to them. So it can be kind of a pain. But in situations where you find it, and I have found it in plenty of situations, it can be useful and help you save a bunch of miles. So it's one of those things. Is a tool that you want to keep in your back pocket. And by the way, speaking of tools, the award search tools will find the mixed cabin pricing and display it accurately in most cases. So they can be a great way to find the opportunities for that.
Yeah. Another one that does this is Cathay Pacific Asia Miles, and now they have distance-based pricing. So tacking on a leg isn't necessarily going to help you, except where it's really helpful is at the top of the word chart, meaning like if your first, so for example, if your first leg already gets to their longest distance band, then adding on additional flying is not going to increase the price. And if you're adding on additional flying in a lower class of service, then it decreases the overall price. So flying first class from Chicago to Hong Kong, and then economy from Hong Kong to Johannesburg is way cheaper than just flying first class in that first segment and leaving it there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's another one to keep in mind and to look at. And that's a program that doesn't get talked about nearly as much, but that could be a sweet spot use of it.
Yep. Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Then we should talk about multi-partner awards, right?
Yeah, so this is almost more of a grab bag of situations where some airlines you can save miles by combining multiple partners on one award, which sounds like crazy, but I came up with three, one of which is based on some research that Nick just did. So tell us about Aeroplan.
Yeah, Air Canada Aeroplan has one award chart for most of their partners, but then they have a separate piece of the chart for Air Canada and Select partners. And just recently, they moved United onto that and Select Partners award chart. And the bummer there is that the Air Canada and Select Partners award chart is not really very useful in terms of figuring out the price, because it just lists the starting at price and the median price, but there's no cap as to what awards might cost. So United awards have, no surprise, become more expensive. Nonstop United awards have become more expensive. But what I found was that when you mix United and at least one other partner on an award, at least for now, at the time that we're recording this, the awards are pricing according to the regular Star Alliance award chart. So to give an example of this, I wrote in the post that Houston to Sao Paulo in Brazil would be 100,000 miles one way on United nonstop. So it's 100,000 Aeroplan points one way nonstop for that United flight. However, if you connect on from Sao Paulo, which you can do on numerous different partners, if you connect on from Sao Paulo to another place, then the price drops to 60,000 miles one way in business class. So you save 40,000 miles by connecting on another partner. And like I said, there's actually quite a few partners from there in particular. That's a great example of a place where you've got a multitude of options for connecting itineraries on other partners. And, so you can find that to Europe as well. Europe, I found the nonstops on United were 80,000 miles, but when you're connecting and adding a leg on Lufthansa, for instance, the price drops to 60,000 miles one way in business class. Again, for now, and I say 60,000, that's on the shortest distance ones, 70,000, depends on where you're starting,
Sure.
because of course Air Canada has a distance-based chart as well.
Yeah, so that's a great one, and I think very relevant to a lot of people because Avianca, not Avianca, Aeroplan is a very useful program for booking not just Star Alliance, but also there are many other partners, and the fact that they let you, add a stopover for 5,000 extra points just makes it all the more flexible. And they're also transfer partners from a number of transferable points currencies. So it's a program to keep your eye on. And so when things change like this, like where they moved United to this different model of pricing, it's worth like kind of keeping track of some workarounds to that. All right, the next one in this multi-partner awards is with British Airways, Avios. So normally, British Airways prices awards based on the segment flown, the distance of the segment flown, and some weird exception logic that it has, like certain routes, like U.S. to Doha, is a fixed price. They just have kind of a bizarre thing. But anyway, if you are flying two or more of British Airways partners on one award, you can book it through their multi-carrier reward chart, which is different pricing, and it's based on the cumulative distance flown across all the legs. So it's not pricing leg by leg. This is one where whether it's going to save you or not just depends on the circumstance. There will be circumstances where you could potentially save a lot of miles, and there's others where it may cost more to book through that multi-carrier reward chart, and then you'd be better off just booking one segment at a time and building up your itinerary that way.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, the final one I have in this collection is even more specialized than that. It's ANA. So ANA's Star Alliance Round the World Awards. ANA has increased their Star Alliance award prices in general from time to time lately, but they haven't changed their Round the World award chart. And so if you want to use the Round the World award, you have to have a couple partners, a couple Star Alliance airlines involved. And it turns out that there are plenty of circumstances where it would be cheaper instead of using your ANA miles to book like North America to Asia round trip or North America to Europe round trip. It would actually be cheaper to fly around the world with ANA's Around the World award chart. And then you could save a bunch of miles that way.
Yeah, that's one that I love in theory, and I haven't yet had the opportunity to put into practice. I know you have. Is it difficult to book?
Yes. So there's all kinds of reasons I actually I love this like theoretically more than I love it in practice. So you have to have your whole route, like awards have to be available for your whole route when you call up to book this thing, and you're not allowed changes except for to the like time and date of your flights. You have to keep the exact same carrier and segments. So for example, like if I ideally want to fly a nonstop flight from Australia or New Zealand back to America at the end of my round the world trip. But that's not available at the time I call to book this whole thing. And so I route instead through Asia, and then to America. I can't later, when that award space opens up, change it to that nonstop. And so that's a real bummer. Other complications include the fact that ANA does pass along fuel surcharges. So you want to avoid airlines like Lufthansa that charge incredibly high surcharges and things like that. So very complicated, but but the savings can be huge if you are willing to live with all those gotchas.
Yeah, yeah, definitely one that I get excited about thinking about. A around the world tickets are not so easy in practice, probably, but fun to think about and dream about anyway. So there you have that. Okay, and then last but not least, in this section is using some kind of, or maybe it's its own section, I guess, is creative routings to save miles. And so I'll give one example from a trip we did last year, a family trip I did last summer. And so the shortest version of the story is that we were starting in Paris and I wanted to go to Mauritius, but I wanted to also continue on to Asia. And so we devised this plan to fly from Paris to Mauritius, do a 5-day stopover, and then continue on to Asia. So the routing for that had us going from Paris to Mauritius, and then from Mauritius to Kuala Lumpur to Singapore to Japan to Tokyo. And so
And that's how
that's
Nick rolls, by the way. If you
that
think,
is
wow,
that
that's
is.
incredible, that's like a regular day for Nick.
It's all part of the fun, right? You learn about this stuff, you want to use it. So anyway, and you can do that sort of thing, and it costs 5,000 additional miles for a stopover. Air Canada's core routing rule, they allow really out of the way routings similar to that, but the core rule is that the total distance you fly cannot be more than double the distance from your starting point to your ending point. So let's imagine, I haven't even looked this up. I have no idea what the real number is, but let's keep the math simple. Let's imagine the distance from Paris to Tokyo is 10,000 miles flown. That means that I can zig and zag any way I want, but I can't fly more than double that. So I can't fly more than 20,000 total miles to get from Paris to Tokyo. And this is the sort of situation I was in. And unfortunately, that routing that I just mentioned, Paris to Mauritius to Kuala Lumpur to Singapore to Tokyo, was like, let's say 21,000 miles or 22,000 miles. It was a little
Hmm.
bit too
It was
long
just over
and just over the maximum
yeah,
permitted in that case, so over the
yeah.
double the nonstop distance. So I thought, oh no, that's too bad because I'd love to be able to do that. And there's 4 award seats on all these flights. So I have it all together where there's 4 seats in business class and I can make this work. So I was a little frustrated. And then I said, well, my I still had enough. Well, first of all, Air Canada allows up to 6 segments on an award itinerary. If you're counting, I had Paris to Mauritius, Mauritius to Kuala Lumpur, Kuala Lumpur to Singapore, Singapore to Tokyo. That's only 4 segments. So I still had 2 more segments to play with. So ultimately, I realized, well, the problem here is that my ending point needs to be farther from Paris so that I can fly more out of the way. So I got to get farther from Paris than Tokyo. Tokyo isn't far enough away for my ending point. And then I realized, it came to me, I said, oh, you know what? United has flights to Guam from Japan. And actually, I said Tokyo. I think it was actually Osaka, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
They fly from both Osaka and Tokyo to Guam. And I said, oh, well, Guam is pretty far from Paris. So if that's my ending point, I looked it up, and let's say that distance was 12,000 miles flown. So then I could go out of the way and fly up to 24,000 total miles. So that's exactly what I did. I booked all of what I just said. And then the final segment was flying from Japan to Guam. And that was only available in economy class on United, but that didn't matter to me because ultimately I missed that flight, so stayed in Japan. So yeah, that by
Whoops.
booking whoops, by booking a trip that was farther than what I actually originally intended, I was able to book that award that just wouldn't have even been available. Forget about saving miles in this case. I would have had to have booked some of that as separate awards. So I guess it would have cost me a lot more in miles to book all of that as separate award tickets. So,
Yeah.
so
Am,
you
am
could
I
do
re-
some creative routing.
yeah, am I remembering right that you booked the flight to Guam for the next day after you arrived in
Uh,
Japan so that like if you had to check bags or anything, like they would expect you to collect your bags because you have an overnight at the hotel.
yeah, that's exactly right. So we were arriving and it was Osaka now that I remember it. We were arriving Singapore to Osaka at night, I don't know, 8 o'clock at night or something like that. And the flight onward to Guam was the next day at, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the afternoon or something. So nobody even questioned the fact that we were looking to check our bags just to Osaka because, like Greg said, of course you would want your bags because you're going to be spending the night in a hotel. So in that case, I did check bags on the itinerary, and I was pretty
Yeah.
confident it probably wasn't going to be an issue. And worst case, if they had said no, they have to tag our bags to Guam, then I probably would have flown to Guam by myself and picked up our bags and flown back to
Yeah.
Japan. But I was willing to take that risk because I thought it was probably minimal. Because based on all my past experience, when I've flown those multi-partner awards like that, it's been particularly easy to check just to the next destination. I find that that's a lot easier to do on those really complicated awards because it's complicated probably for the agent to through check it on the partner flight. So a little bit easier. And that's certainly the overnight layover is what made all the difference. I think I've never had a problem checking my bags to an intermediary part when I have an overnight layover.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So that's all our ways of flying, of saving miles by flying more. And it just occurred to me, I don't think we set up the outline purposely this way, but we kind of started at the easiest to understand, I think, and moved to the most complicated, which is good. So
Right.
hopefully we didn't scare away everybody yet.
And so if you're not scared away yet, then I think that brings us to this week's question of the week. So for those who are hanging on by a thread, let's move into this week's question of the week. This week's question of the week came in via email, and it comes from Matt in PDX. So Matt wrote in and said, my question, I've applied for the Hawaiian Airlines credit card and gotten it in the hopes of getting the miles transferred over to Alaska before the final melding between the two airlines. Now, I'll pause quickly. We've mentioned this a number of times before on the show, but Alaska and Hawaiian are merging. At some point, they're going to become one frequent flyer program. But for now, you can move miles and points back and forth between the two. And so you can move your Hawaiian miles to Alaska. So Matt is writing in because his strategy was to earn the welcome bonus on the Hawaiian card and turn them into Alaska miles. So, okay, he applied for the Hawaiian Airlines card, got it in the hopes of transferring over to Alaska. Have done so for my player two as well, for the spouse, partner, whatever. Should I wait to get the other Hawaiian card through Bank of Hawaii, or should I give it a go now? I'm concerned that if I wait, it'll be all gone by summer. Thoughts? Thanks from Matt and PDX. And of course, he's concerned it'll be all gone by summer because we expect the programs to come together in summer of 2025 is what they have said. And so our prediction has been that the Hawaiian credit cards would probably go away. So he got one Hawaiian Airlines card for himself and his partner, and wondering should he wait to get the other Bank of Hawaiian card through Bank of Hawaii or give it a go now?
Well, so I mean, we don't know when the cards will no longer be available. The latest information seems to suggest it's probably not going to be till fall. Like that, there'll be announcement in the summer about the combined programs, and it won't happen until fall. That doesn't mean that the cards will still be available after that, though. So here's where I'm the wrong person to ask is I'm not sure what the current situation is with regards to the Bank of Hawaii version of this card and the Barclays version of this, or the is it Barclays or Bank of America? Now I'm even forgetting.
Barclays.
Barclays. So I'm hoping that Nick, you're reading this question because you're up on the latest with that.
Well, I'm reading this question because when this question came in via email, I misread it. And I thought that Matt was talking about the Hawaiian business card. And he was saying, okay, we opened up the Hawaiian consumer card. How long should we wait before we try for the business card? And
Right.
so that was the question that I thought I heard. And I misheard it. Let's be clear. I'll come back to that in a second. And I was going to say, well, there's no reason to wait. Just go ahead and apply for it because you can have both the business and the consumer version of the Hawaiian Airlines credit card. But Greg brings up the good point that is what I had known but not known about is that there are two consumer Hawaiian Airlines credit cards. They are both actually through Barclays, but one is marketed as a Bank of Hawaii card, even though it's a Barclays login and everything, and Barclays
Right.
actually issues it. It's marketed as a Bank of Hawaii credit card, and the other one is marketed as a Barclays credit card. Now, I had mistakenly been filing this differently in my mind because United had a similar situation for years with a credit card that was only issued in Hawaii, But my recollection of that card is that I think when you go to fill out the application for the United card, I don't even know if it exists anymore, but the one that did exist in Hawaii, you had to pick a Hawaii billing address for the Bank of Hawaii version of their card. And so I was thinking to myself, even when I saw the news or saw someone mention of the Bank of Hawaii Hawaiian card, I thought, oh, you've got to be a Hawaii resident to get that. And so I had misfiled it because I recently stumbled on Doctor of Credit writing about the bonuses on both of those consumer Hawaiian cards. And then I dug into the comments a little bit and I realized that numerous people have been able to open both the Barclays card that I've long known about and the Bank of America card, or rather Bank of America, I keep saying that wrong, Bank of Hawaii, Hawaiian Airlines card, which are both issued by Barclays. Now, I've seen and read plenty of data points in the Doctor of Credit thread of people applying for both on the same day. And usually the second one is not going through instantly, but people have then called reconsideration and gotten the application put through. And very surprisingly to me, I've seen a number of data points of people who say that phone agents are aware that they're two separate products and can see both applications and know that you're eligible to get both of the two separate products. That surprised me in particular. So it's a matter of getting a reconsideration agent to run that second application. And the reason that some people have wanted to do both in one day is because I think the inquiries end up getting combined into one and when they're both in the same day, since they're both technically from Barclays. Don't quote me on that and don't hold me to it on that, but I think that's the reason a number of people have done both in the same day. So since I've seen a number of positive data points from people who have gotten approved for both in the same day, I don't think you need to wait at all on that. I think you can apply for the other one, and in fact I have in mind now to do that myself, because that will be a nice haul of Hawaiian miles. My wife just got the Hawaiian business card recently, and because we need more and more Alaska miles, and so now I'm looking at those two Hawaiian consumer cards and thinking, ooh, that's a nice chunk if we both did two of those, because the welcome bonuses are 70,000 miles on both of them. So that's 140,000 for opening the two consumer cards for each of us. That's 280 between us. So that's a nice little chunk all of a sudden. So I'm pretty tempted by that.
Let me add on to this sort of big picture perspective here. This is a really rare time to jump on this, not just for yourself, but with extended family. The Hawaiian Airlines card has the ability to let you freely move points to another person. So if you have the card or someone else has the card, they could move their points to you. So if you're managing points across like a family of adults who are old enough to sign up for cards, this is a really rare opportunity to have multiple people sign up. You could move all of those points to one person's account, to your account if you're the one who manages miles for the family, and then you can move all those points to Alaska where they're more valuable. Or they'll just become Alaska miles eventually or whatever the combined program thing is eventually. This is something. If you ever look at stuff going on in the miles and points stuff and say, oh, I wish I had taken advantage of XYZ back when it was available. This is one of those times where we're telling you now up front, do it now.
Yeah, I think you'll regret it later if you don't do it now. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we also had a report in Frequent Miler Insiders this week of someone who received a targeted 85,000 mile welcome bonus offer that may or may not appeal to you because it requires a little bit more spend. You can check for our post about that. And from the screenshot they sent, it looked like it was the Bank of Hawaii version of the card based on the card art in the screenshot. But I don't know the details because I didn't receive that myself and I was disappointed. And so I logged into my Hawaiian Miles account and I realized I didn't have the box checked to receive emails about partner offers. And I was like, oh, man, I hope I didn't miss the 85,000 point offer because I forgot that check mark. So I always try and opt in for those things because I want to see those targeted higher offers when they come out. So certainly, even though at the 70,000 miles per card for the low amount of purchases required, it's a pretty good deal. And like Greg said, I think people will regret not getting them when they're gone.
Yeah.
All right. That brings us to the end of today's episode. If you've enjoyed this stuff and you'd like to get more of it in your email inbox each day or each week, you want to go to frequentmiler.com/subscribe to join our email list. You can follow us on all the various social media, join our Frequent Miler Insiders Facebook group to discuss stuff like this every day. And if you have a question that you'd like to be considered for a future question of the week or a piece of feedback that you'd like to be considered for the giant mailbag, you can send that too.
Send it to mailbag@frequentmiler.com. Bye, everybody.